That was your first mistake to do. You took your lucky break and broke in. Whose lucky break? We believe that we can't be wrong. But I believe it could possibly be wrong.
Hi, McCartney fans, and welcome to episode 113 of Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. We are a Paul McCartney talk show mainly dealing with the solo career of our kid, Paul McCartney. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Tom Hunyadi. You may know me from my other show, Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. And as always, I am joined by my partner in crime, my backwards traveler. He is Andy Nichols. Andy, my friend, you bundled up over there? Is it getting chilly?
I'm awaiting the snowstorm of 2020 to end this crappiest of crap years. So
Yes, the crap years, the crap of all crap years.
pretty much, but yeah.
yeah.
So doing all right, hanging in there, and by the time this goes up, we'll have McCartney 3.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Well, hopefully, this snowstorm you guys are supposed to get won't affect your McCartney 3 going. Whether you're going to go to the store or not, or what. So
I hope not. Although I did, side note, I did get an email from Amazon saying that the vinyl has been delayed until December 22nd.
22nd. Yeah, but you know what? And that's happened before too. I think what was the last thing we got?
Rupert,
I think. Yeah, but what was before that? The big
Flaming
box
Pie?
set before.
Flaming
Yeah,
Pie.
no. Flowers in the Dirt. No, I'm
Oh.
sorry. No, Flaming Pie. Sorry, I got that it was going to be out like the week later, but I ended up getting it on release day anyways.
Oh, okay.
So it's really weird how they do that.
I don't know. Let's hope it arrives when it's supposed to arrive. It's already a week late.
Yes, it already is a week late.
Good.
But yes, when this is posted, yes, McCartney 3 will be here, and I hope everybody is enjoying it. And we'll be doing our show on McCartney 3 with the one and only Luca Perazzi, so looking forward to that. However, as you can see, we have a third gentleman with us. He is the show of...
Sorry, I'm so conscious. The first video one.
Yes. Yeah, he's making his video debut. See what we do for you people out there? We get people to make their video debuts. And he is the host of the excellent Glass Onion on John Lennon. He is Antony Rotunno. Anthony, my friend, how are you? And thank you for being on the show.
I'm doing very well, thanks. Tom Hunyadi, I remember you. The last time I spoke to you, you were riding so high.
Yes, I was riding so high because I was super excited to be talking about that book, and I might have been a little too excited because, when I get too excited, I really, talk fast and ramble sometimes.
We were pumping ourselves full of legal drugs, I remember.
Yes, we were.
Ritas and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but thank you for having me on for that show. It's definitely a topic that's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
But we'll save that for discussion for another time. But Antony, my friend, let's talk about Glass Onion. Let's just talk about you becoming a Lennon fan at first, and what was your impressions of him when you first discovered the Beatles and Lennon?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Beatles are everywhere in England. So I always say my Beatles origin story is being born.
I love it.
But no, it's about, there are a couple of things that happened, but mostly I did a project about the Beatles at school, actually. And it was one of those things where you feel like you know them, but then when someone actually gives you like the White Album or something, and the early stuff, I think most people would know that early stuff and maybe Yellow Submarine and stuff. But I think it was my sister Marina, who is 5 years older than me and was much more advanced in terms of music. She gave me, it was either the White Album or Abbey Road, I can't remember of the two. She said, "Oh, listen to this." And the White Album I just couldn't get into because I was used to all this She Loves You, Hard Days, and everything. But then over time, this wonderful thing happens that you get with music that's, I mean, it sounds laughable now to think that the White Album is challenging in the sense of not being commercial or accessible, because it is, but compared to the early stuff, it wasn't.
Right.
Then there's a great moment where a light bulb goes off and you think, oh, wow, this is good. And then with John Lennon, we were talking before about the Ray Coleman book, the nice biography of John Lennon. That was my entry point. And I remember reading it, taking it to school and reading it. And I used to go home for lunch from school. And it was that lovely you got 30 minutes out of school and then you had to go back. And I got this book, and this sounds like a terrible cliche. I just couldn't put this book down, and I ended up not going back to school. Only that day, I should say.
I was just going to say, until you got done reading it, right?
I did, yeah. I mean, I got done reading it in about 2 days. It was just it was absolutely compulsive. And it was, I think the thing I remember was that I was reading about this guy that I didn't really know that much about him. Like I say, it seemed like I did, but I didn't really. I didn't know he was such a rebel at school. And I think it was a combination of being rebellious and appearing not to care what happened to him. Mm-hmm. And on the back of the jacket, it says something like, the man whose complex personality earned him the love of millions.
Right.
It was that killer combination. And then just reading about him and just reading about all the different Johns, like he was a different John every 18 months, the 65 John and the 67 John. Looks like he's aged about 20 years. And and he's just been a compelling figure. I mean, all the Beatles for sure. I think John Lennon was always the one I gravitated to.
Right. Yeah.
And obviously there was that air of mystery, because at some point you realize that he's not around anymore. I was getting into the Beatles in the late 80s, and suddenly you realize, oh yeah, he was killed in 1980. So you want to know that. And so there's an element of mystery, I think, about him. And then it's sort of carried on really. And any point where I thought I knew everything of the Beatles, suddenly there's all these great books and there's isolated tracks, and you can hear little bits of guitar you've never heard before, and it's just like the gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. I can definitely relate to the whole, because when I got into the Beatles and Lennon, I was a teenager too. So I definitely get that whole rebellious, thing when it comes to, with John. You just gravitate towards that, especially in those teenage years, and especially with songs like, You Can't Do That and Bad Boy and Run for Your Life and, stuff like that. So I definitely get where you're coming from there.
Yeah, but I feel like if I'd only got into him because of being a rebellious, or sort of the rebelliousness that's inside every teenager, some of them act it out, some of them don't, but I think it's always there. But I think if it was only because of that, then it wouldn't have endured. But I still find him more fascinating than ever. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's been quite a bit of revisionism. I mean, there's always revisionism, let's be honest. There's one podcast in particular I won't mention now, but they've done like a whole series, and they kind of really, I don't know, it's kind of smash the myth, if you want to call it that. But I think it's been myth smashing for years. I think the story is just going round and round. It's like all this new research suggests that John Lennon was this, and then another 6 months of research suggests, or maybe he was that. So as I was saying to you just before we started, the more I do this podcast, the less I know for sure. Right. So I'm just giving the listeners my best guess,
Right. So starting the show, then let's talk about that, because you were fortunate in the sense that, when you started, you're basically the only, just show dedicated to John Lennon, and which is, cool thing at that. But you take it more than just the music. You also look into the psyche of Lennon, and have had some very interesting guests talking about Lennon. Let's just talk about that for a few minutes.
Sure. I mean, I'm not doing, at the moment, I'm not monetizing the podcast at all, so I don't really have any agenda that I'm doing for any particular reason. But I mean, I do have a studied psychology, and I know I tend to have a tendency to overanalyze and look way too deeply into a lot of things. So I did kind of think, well, that was my niche. And as you said, there aren't any other ones that I could see. There was Jude Kessler's one, which she she now has a new one called She Said, She Said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just sort of deep diving, as you guys would say in America, I've found, yeah, and also I've gone into a couple of areas that I don't think anyone else wants to go into, which is Mark David Chapman,
Right.
Albert Goldman, and drugs. I mean, drugs kind of get name checked, but you and I, as I was saying earlier, we reviewed this book, Riding So High, on the show, and there's so much about drugs that's misunderstood, particularly as you know, as you remember, we talked about legal drugs.
Right.
The idea that there's alcohol and then there's drugs. You know, this is a bit too long of a tangent to go on, but in short, you know, and Mark Chapman, I mean, I totally understand people don't want to know his name. That's absolutely fine. You know, you can ignore the episode. It's totally fine. And then Goldman, we've just, we were talking again before. I've established what I call the Ray Coleman, Albert Goldman continuum. Between John, when John was 40, he was a family man and all his childhood demons and squash. On the other side, he was like a wasted drug addict who didn't have a good thing to say about anyone. And obviously the truth is somewhere, but you know, that's just always compelling. But I actually just, the last episode I put out, which was actually recorded back in May, one of the guests was Caitlin Hare, and her mother was Marnie Hare, who was Yoko Ono's very good friend in the Dakota, and was also Albert Goldman.
She was one of her psychics, right?
No, she wasn't a psychic. No, she had a lot of psychics, but
no,
I
thought Marnie Hare was one of the psychics.
No, they'd actually just met her at random. But very interestingly, Yoko recommended Marnie Hare to Goldman as a source. So Yoko was obviously fairly confident that what Marnie Hare was going to tell Goldman was something like the truth. Anyway, to cut a long story short, so I had Marnie Hare's daughter, and she was so interested in the conversation that we're going to probably do some kind of follow-up. And she actually thinks that Goldman may have been Goldman was a big Lennon fan and was apparently very disappointed when he started researching him and found that maybe John wasn't the golden boy that he thought. So I think maybe a bit of vindictiveness went into the book. But
gotcha.
I guess, yeah, just to say, I guess my podcast goes into certain areas. And like I say, I've got the floor to myself at the moment. I mean, I know you talk is solo Beatles, so.
Right.
Well, on the Goldman aspect, it's interesting you bring him up. Have you ever seen the YouTube clip between Goldman and Hunter Davies?
Yes,
that's an amazing interview where they kind of both challenge each other on the sources. And Ray Coleman not Ray Coleman. Hunter Davies is very protective of John's legacy. And Albert Goldman is like, look, these are what the facts are. This is what I've researched. And Goldman has his agendas. And I studied this when I was in Liverpool because I studied historiography. So he might have his agenda, but the methods in which he conducted his research, especially in the Liverpool aspect of Lennon's life, was top notch. His research was, accurate. Now, the spin that he put on that, of course, was his own spin. But because we had met one of his principal Liverpool researchers, and I wish I remember the gentleman's name. He came to speak to us, but Goldman hired him to research the Liverpool portion of Lennon's life. And again, say whatever you want about the book, but the methods in which he undertook his research to make sure that it was actual and accurate, factual, was quite honestly, good. So
yeah, I think it's the way it's presented.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I had a weird experience when I was about 14, 15. I told you before I got the Goldman book for my birthday. Sorry, I'll start that again. I got the Coleman book for my birthday. And I actually read the Albert Goldman book, I think 6 months or a year later. And for all my faults, I am quite open-minded, and I'm fairly broad-minded, and I'm pretty open to opinions. But reading those two books within like a year of each other, it's like, what?
Yeah, I was the same person.
Same person. It's like, it's nuts.
Yeah.
And I remember that, again, I think it's the presentation, because the very first chapter of Goldman's book is Yoko scoring heroin in 1980.
Right.
You think, well, why would that be chapter 1? I think I'm pretty sure might have to check that, but pretty sure that's literally chapter 1.
Right.
Right.
Immediately off the bat, he's obviously
So the tone, the negative connotation has already been set right from the get-go.
Yeah.
He's looking for that shock value, right?
Yeah. I mean, he apparently got a $1 million advance, and you can't say that that's not going to affect it. We don't know what I've never published a book, but I don't know how much the editors can bully the writer or cajole the writer or whatever. So I definitely wouldn't point people towards Goldman and say that's the truth, but I think there's a lot to know. And I was very happy when I had Ken Womack on.
Right.
He was very open to talking about that, even though it wasn't really what his book was about, as I was telling you earlier.
Right.
He was very open to that topic, and he said I find it fascinating as well.
Right. Have you done any shows about just like Lennon with the possibility of being, bipolar or manic depressant or anything like that?
Yes, that was actually one of the original things I wanted to do, is some sort of psychology show. I got a guy who he's a psychology professional. He's a therapist,
right?
And he has a really good podcast called Psychology in Seattle, which I'd recommend to anyone. It's very, very accessible psychology.
Gotcha.
And I managed to get him on the show, and he was at pains to say that he wasn't diagnosing John Lennon, obviously, because it's 40 years after the fact, and he never met him. But yeah, he said with all sort of John Lennon's childhood trauma, the things we know about, he didn't say bipolar especially. He said he could well have been borderline. There's definitely some narcissistic tendencies, but that could probably apply to 100% rock stars. Who knows?
Right.
He would say, yeah. I said he was at pains not to make any concrete statements, but I mean, there's something there, and there's other theories that say that a lot of people get famous. I mean, in fact, the very first page of the Beatles anthology book is John Lennon saying something like, "I'm only famous because of my repression. Famous because I want something like my parents to love me." That's why you go on stage, because you're like, "Come on, everyone, will you love me, please?" So I wouldn't really want to. I certainly wouldn't want to commit myself to diagnosing him, but I think there's something there. I mean, I think it's fair to say that Paul McCartney, although of course he had a similar trauma in that losing his mother,
absolutely,
it seems like he's more emotionally stable.
Right.
Sure.
He's had different coping mechanisms,
Music mainly. I would argue.
Or Muzak, whatever, since that will factor in. I'm sure.
Well, I think John Lennon's maybe defense mechanism or coping mechanism was to kind of keep the world at arm's length, while still probably asking the world to love him at the same time, because he tried to become a famous pop star and obviously did.
Right.
Paul's idea was to charm the world.
Use his personality to charm them and please. Be a people pleaser. And, John had no interest in being a people pleaser.
Well, I mean, certain instances you can see him trying. I mean, especially him signing autographs whenever him and Yoko were strolling through Central Park. I mean, there's times where you'll see him being a charmer or a pleaser, but you can definitely see the more. But it's the side of him that gets agitated or angry. I mean, those are the sides of him that are always reported.
Right, not the warmer sides. Right.
Exactly.
It suits the narrative that's been established for 40 plus years. You see. So.
Right.
I think with John Lennon, there's perhaps far more of a tendency to lash out. And obviously, one of our bullet points today, certain interview from December 1970.
Right.
About
3 hours of lashing out, but we'll get to it.
And so, everybody always has to remember that, like, as you mentioned earlier, well, which John Lennon were you talking to? The 1970 John Lennon or the 1973 John Lennon? Because he changed, as you well know, Anthony. He just, his moods changed like the wind. So you caught him on a bad day or a bad period in his life. That was going to, obviously, people take that and run with it. And it becomes, once it's printed and written.
Right.
So, it's very hard to take those things back.
Were we recording when I said that the more I find out, the less I know?
Yeah.
Yes.
Were we already recording? Okay. So I always tell my listeners, this is my best guess after 30 years of research.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So before we get into our topic, you also just started a film podcast as well. Talk about that.
If you don't mind, yeah. It's called Film Gold.
Okay.
This one took longer to get going because the Glass Onion one, I was thinking about it for about 2 years. You know, podcast years ago, like 2008, 2009. Anyway, so I had an idea last year. Just the title "Film Gold" came to me, and I have a massive film buff, and films are kind of ripe for the kind of over-analysis that comes to me. So anyway, I've only got the intro episode, but perhaps by the time this goes out, I might have the second one, which is a review of a Christmas film. I don't want to give away the title, but it's a James Stewart film. Have a
wild. Involved with that one.
What one could that be?
Yeah, what could that possibly be? Just ring a quick bell, and you'll get. Yeah.
Well, if you get to a Clockwork Orange and you need a guest for that, I'd be more than happy to.
It's amazing. I didn't even put a message saying would anyone like to join me. But on Saturday, my niece saw my advert and said, "Oh, I like your logo. That was by Warren Brown, actually." From.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tomorrow never knows. Yeah.
He's brilliant. What a great.
He's a great graphic designer, great artist. Absolutely.
He sent me like 6 designs, and I could have used any of them, and I chose one. And anyway, my niece has invited herself on, and obviously his family. My sister has invited herself on. So I'll try and get to everybody, but Glass Onion has to take priority.
Yes.
I spend a hell of a lot of time, sort of, not so much the research, because a lot of it's kind of already there.
Right.
Editing and all that kind of thing. So I don't want to promise that the Film Gold podcast will be too frequent, but it'll be there next year.
Great. Look forward to it because, I mean, as you can see behind me, films are very important to me as well. So, look forward to it.
A couple of DVDs going on.
Yeah, there. a couple there. But on today's show, you know, ever since you invited me on your great show, I've just been thinking of ideas of how we can, you know, have you and incorporate Lennon on the Two Legs show here. And, you know, a lot of things that were running through my head. Let's talk about how do you sleep, or we can talk about here today, you know, how do we get you on? And I think we came up with a pretty good idea, and that's pretty much their relationship throughout the 70s. And we're going to, we'll talk about 70 and 71 here today, and hopefully down the line we'll continue this series. But you know, how did you see? I mean, as somebody that's been, you know, studying Lennon and, you know, a little bit of the Beatles as much. I mean, how did you see that relationship ending, and, you know, the 60s ending with the Lennon and McCartney relationship?
Oh God, just a little question, Tom?
Yeah.
I'll try and summarize.
Yeah.
I don't want to cop out, but it's like an ever-changing story.
Right.
I mean, we keep sort of finding out now that perhaps they did want to stay together, and going to put out an album at Christmas '69. So, it's so difficult. I think the narrative that perhaps I would like to not smash, but at least disagree with. I think the narrative that I grew up with was always that Paul wanted the Beatles more than the others.
Right.
And I think if you go back to just to backtrack a bit to get back, I actually listened to the entire Nagra reels.
Wow.
Up to all I'm missing is the last 6 days because they got taken down. Some lovely person put them up on
really.
Apple just continually kept taking them down.
Right.
And from the Nagra reels, all I'm going to say about it is that Paul just seems to have more songs and generally more energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
I think a big part of that, which perhaps isn't picked up on as much, is the fact they were doing early mornings.
Right.
The fact they just finished the White Album, and instead of using those songs for some sort of special, they were immediately going on to new songs. Anyway, to get to your question, I think Paul wanted the Beatles more than the others for a certain period. But I think from a couple of the interviews we're going to talk about, and I was reading them with a lot of interest today, because I don't know Paul's solo period as much as John's. I think Paul came to terms with the fact the Beatles were over much quicker than he's given credit for, let's say.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I think he dealt with it. And then I think it's possible to say, again, only my best guess, that perhaps after a certain point, it kind of, the pendulum swung a bit, and John was perhaps the one who was,
Second guessing himself, you think?
yeah, maybe, yeah. And it definitely was on his mind. And again, I know we're not going to talk about the late 70s, but I have found out recently from a couple of guests that have been on the show that it seems that Paul was on John's mind, not constantly, but a lot of the time.
Okay.
So I think maybe there was again, my best guess, a little bit of a switch. So Paul kind of needed them more, and then perhaps John needed them more. But you know,
Right.
we're never going to know. That's why we're still discussing it, basically, isn't it?
Right. Well, because you see, you know, he comes back, he does the live piece Toronto show. He's so excited about working with other people. You know, he also did the rock and roll Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus, even though we didn't know about it then. But again, you know, he's excited about working with other people. So I can see the fact that, you know, him wanting to get out, you know, and then his comments, you know, about Paul, which we'll get to in a few minutes too. But you know, but I can kind of almost get that second guessing kind of feel, because then you got that historic meeting. What was it, the 21st, Andy? The September, I think,
meeting, yeah, the September
where,
meeting
you
of
know,
'69, where everybody
yeah,
but
Ringo,
Ringo was there. Yeah,
right? Yeah, and they're talking about, you know, doing equal amount of songs, you know, between John, Paul, and George. You know, give Ringo what, 2 songs
two
was it?
songs. Give George. They would each have 4 songs each.
Right. So even in that late in the year, there's still hope of, you know, the Beatles still working as a team.
Yeah, I was, just as a side note, back to what Anthony was talking about at the beginning of those sessions in January '69. I've always kind of long felt that they rushed into that after doing 30 songs with the White Album. If they had just taken a few months off,
Right.
collect themselves after putting out such a whopper of an album of 30 songs, what do? Basically, New Year's Day, they run right into, and they starting to make a film and recording them more. I just think if they had just given a few months off to breathe as individuals, who knows what the future might have held. You know, I think the fact that they ran right back in
Right.
to do that, you know, given on what was everything that was going on, business issues, growing up as individuals, marrying kids, all those things, and then we're going to go right back in to record an album and a film at
Right.
8:30 in the morning at Twickenham Studios. Like, who wants to do that? I've always
But
thought they just waited till
right.
May or June and then reconvene.
Yeah, but to that point though, taking a break, you know, John and Yoko, they weren't taking a break. I mean, those two were very busy in late 68 and going into 69. It seemed like those two were just, you know, releasing albums, you know, doing their art stuff. I mean, doing appearances, you know, Yoko doing Grapefruit. I mean, it just seemed like they were just going, you know, it was just one consistent, you know, 2 years where they were just, you know, everywhere. You know, they were releasing stuff. So I don't know if a 2-year break would have helped John that much. I mean, I'm sorry, a 2-month break would have helped John much, because he was still very active,
Yeah.
just with somebody else, you know.
Just kind of hard to believe. I mean, it's so strange, isn't it? Because can I just share a couple of things from the Nagra
Yeah,
reel, just very brief?
please.
I mean, they are relevant as well to what we're talking about. There's a point. I think it's maybe the day after George has walked out,
Right.
and they just. I mean, as I said, I listened to the whole lot because it's so Nagra reels. I thought once in my life I've got to listen to the whole thing.
Right.
And there's a couple of days they just waste like the next 2 days completely. Just John and Paul are basically trading one-liners, which are not actually that funny, you know. I mean, obviously they're funny guys, but when you're trying a bit too hard, it doesn't come off as funny. But there's a really interesting bit where they actually say, I think they actually say almost like, I think the breakup's going to happen soon, isn't it? And Paul said, yeah, I think it's coming. But he doesn't say it with like, oh no, please don't break up. You know, he's quite calm about it. And with John, there's an amazing bit. I think we know that he was obviously doing heroin at that time. There's a famous interview where he had to stop the interview and be sick.
Right.
The two junkies interview. But he seems to verge between energy and not energy. And there's a bit where they're having this really, really long discussion about the future of the band. And you don't hear John talking at all.
Right.
And then you hear someone say, oh, what do you think, John? And he's going, about what? And I was reading the Doug Selby book.
Yeah, of course.
But I was reading it kind of along with what I was listening to. It was really interesting. But yeah, that bit that really struck me was when they were kind of saying, "Oh, we think the group might break up," and Paul says, "Yeah, it's coming."
Right.
Quite
And I don't think they knew at that time either that they were signed to continue as a band until I think like 75 or something like that.
Sure, well, that was with the contract. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think they probably had an idea that their songs might be, or business-wise, they might be intertwined.
right.
Until that time.
Yeah.
I think they would have had some idea of that because they would have known,
Right.
probably how badly they got screwed with the contracts they'd signed.
Right.
Mm.
So I mean, a lot of turn events then from 69 or January of 69, because then they all make up. They do Abbey Road, which seemed to be a happy or more than likely happy experience. Everything seems to be going fine. Obviously, then we get September, and then Paul goes through this massive depression, and you've got a couple people that go to visit Paul in his farm in Scotland. He has a little row with the cameraman, and then next thing you know,
Give me that
yeah.
back.
Next thing you know, he grants an interview, and at the end, it's really funny that this interview is at the very end of the magazine, and the last page. That's where you have.
It's in stone. He said it, and he said it in the magazine, and nobody picked up.
Right.
By the way,
the Beatle thing is over. The Beatle thing is over. Last page of the magazine.
Yeah.
But maybe because it's the last page that it goes ignored.
Yeah. I had a look at that today. There's a really good website called BeatlesInterviews.org.
Mm.
And they've got transcripts of pretty much every Beatles interview. I'm sure they're missing a few, but it's
Right.
pretty comprehensive. I wrote down the paragraph, if you don't mind me.
Yeah, please.
I would rather do what I began by doing, which is making music. We make good music and we want to go on making music, but the Beatle thing is over. It's been exploded partly by what we have done and partly by other people. We are individuals, all different. John married Yoko, I married Linda. We didn't marry the same girl. So where he says we make good music and we want to go on making music, do you think he's talking about him and Linda now, or do you think he's talking about the Beatles?
I always thought he was referring to the Beatles when that quote.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because even George Harrison around that time as well is making comments about, the possibility of the Beatles continuing too. I think he said something like it would be foolish or it would be selfish of us to not continue as a group, Yeah.
He says the Beatle thing is over. It's been exploded. It could be that he's talking about the Beatles, as in, when's the bubble going to burst? That kind of those Beatles that were on the crest of this wave. So I'm not sure it's conclusive, but I'm still quite surprised it didn't get picked up.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that should have been the headline. That should have been
amazing. Think about 1969. There was so much. It's not like today where there's so many sources of information at your fingertips. You've got print, you've got a couple of outlets on television in the UK or in America. So if something like that was going to be said in printed or in radio or television, you would think it would make a splash, because there was so few sources of reliable information available back then that it's still, but again, to your point, Tom, maybe people were just like, it was at the end of the magazine and it doesn't really matter. It's
right, because you figured, somebody would have gotten into Lennon's face, with a microphone and a tape player saying, how do you respond to that comment, which is really interesting that never happened.
But it was very different times, because I had Ken McNabb on last year. He wrote a great book called And in the End.
Right.
We did 69 month by month.
Oh, the whole month by month book.
Yes.
Yeah. We got a bit stuck because we'd done about an hour and a half and got to about April or May. You can't then go, oh, by the way, let's go to December.
Right.
Oh, you'd need 3 episodes just for September of 69.
I think we did nearly 4 hours in the end, but over 3 Skype talks. But anyway, what the amazing thing was that they all at some point they all went on holiday, And they were actually like completely incommunicado for about a month or
Mm-hmm.
3 weeks, a month, something like that. That would never happen. It's not possible that you could just leave for a month and no one could contact you. It's
No.
so different times.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So Paul then, he calls John. He says, "Okay, I'm going to do what you guys are doing. I'm going to leave the band. I'm making an album, which he had already completed at that time. But we'll get more into that part later. But yeah, boring. But anyways, so honestly, okay, so that meeting happens. John wants the divorce. Alan Klein says
after Toronto.
After Toronto. John wants the divorce. Alan Klein convinces him to hold off on saying anything. John does say Paul tried to convince him as well, but then he backtracked. My research has always shown that it was just Alan Klein that said that, but because there were still contracts that needed to be worked out, and I think it was with the Capitol deal.
It was in the best interests of the business not to say anything.
Exactly. I mean, because there are parts of the contract that said that not only was it Beatle related, but also solo Beatle related.
Plus, if he had announced that before the contracts were done, forget it.
There was no
forget
it.
Oh,
forget it. So. Do you personally think that John should have ended it right there, or do you think it was fair on Paul's count to end it when he did in April of 70?
So you mean do you think John should have announced in September 69?
Yeah, or relatively soon after.
I think if he really wanted to, he would have done.
Yeah.
He did. One thing maybe we'll get to later is this idea that Paul's a PR guy and John's always honest. There's no idea about how the world works, which is rubbish. I think he's just, who knows?
Right. Exactly. Who knows?
On Monday, he wanted to leave the Beatles, and then on Tuesday, he thought, oh, maybe we could make another album. And then on Wednesday, he wanted to leave again.
Right.
Get the idea. But all I could say is, I think if he really desperately wanted to, he would have done. So
right, and that's why I sometimes I feel like, John being John, he'll say something one day, and then the next day he maybe I don't. Maybe I don't. So that just now leaves Paul.
But I don't think, just to interrupt, I don't think, and I don't know, Anthony can attest, but I think during that, there was he did change his opinions a lot, but there was a dark period in his life there where he was pretty salty about everything, and he wasn't going to move off of his opinions. That 69, especially the 1970 Rolling Stone interview, he was really negative about just about everything then. And I don't think he still firmly believed Klein was the right man, and the Eastmans were not. Like, there was a good year to year and a half there, or two even, where he was not going to budge from his concrete opinions about Yoko, Klein, Paul, how everything ended. That changed with time, but for a good year and a half to 2 years there, he was really dug in with his opinions on where things were shaping up, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, interestingly, you were asking me earlier about the sort of psychology aspect. I think that's very childlike behavior. It's sort of like, because I think he was very insecure about, people leaving him, all that kind of thing.
Right.
I know that's like what we call coffee table psychology, what you think you call drugstore psychology. That's totally true, but some concepts are very simple and seem to be true. And one of them, a very childlike thing, is to grab onto one person, and say, Yoko is everything to me.
Right.
The famous quote that he said to Pete Shotton, I'll go and live in an effing tent. Putting all your eggs in this one basket. So I think when we get on to Lennon Remembers, I'd like to talk about primal therapy. I won't go into a lot of jargon.
Absolutely. No.
You're absolutely right, Andy. You've gone through this huge trauma, which was the breakup plus the primal therapy. I think it was all just kind of bubbling in his head, and there was all this rage, which is generally seemed to be always there, to be honest.
Because doesn't he deal with his father around the same time too, while he's going through the primal therapy?
Yeah.
Well,
like a dinner meeting that didn't maybe go so well.
We know that's October because I think it was John Lennon's I don't know if it was on his 30th birthday.
Birthday, right?
Yeah, and I mean,
Funny, it's funny not to interrupt you, Anthony, but Howard Stern actually just interviewed Paul McCartney this week and asked him about that encounter and why John might have been going through a dark mood. And Paul references is that this meeting with his John meeting his father, and just interesting to hear Paul's take on it now in 2020. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, Paul's always good with Howard Stern. Actually, they've got good rapport going.
It's too bad most of the interview is always the same.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Well, I've only seen the first couple. Did one in about 2001 and one in 2009 when he had the Fireman album out.
Yep.
Yeah. What were we saying? Yeah, I've seen quotes from Fred that Fred was actually scared that John was going to kill him.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He was like, I think John Lennon, even in like the Andy Peebles interview, which is the very lovey-dovey version of everything, he even says to Andy Peebles that with the Bob Wooler thing, I could have killed him,
Right.
Goldman, of course, had John Lennon picking up a spade and or a shovel and trying to shovel Bob Wooler to death, but apparently his ribs or something. But
it's interesting.
I think there was kind of a murderous. I'm going to say murderous rage. I don't think he would have actually killed someone, but you know what I mean. It's that
right. So Paul, through that time, Paul's going through his troubles as well. I mean, he's newly married. He's got a newborn. He's got an adopted daughter. He's going through a depression, which obviously we talked about. Paul really wanted the Beatles to continue. He's dealing with that. He's got Linda bringing him back to life and getting him back into music. So, I mean, I still don't know if I agree with Paul doing it the way he did with this press release in 1970 to promote McCartney. But I mean, some of the things that I'll mention now, just really kind of, you got to question, where his mind is at the time. And one of the question is, will Paul and Linda become a John and Yoko? And he says, no, they will become a Paul and Linda. Not really that, really ground shaking or anything like that. Well, do you foresee a time when Lennon McCartney becomes a active songwriting partnership again? No, I find that one, very interesting. What do you feel about John's peace effort, the Plastic Ono Band, giving back the MBE, Yoko's influence, Yoko? I love John. I respect what he does. It doesn't give me any pleasure, So, I mean, maybe just like little dings, but, nothing earth shattering or, I mean, obviously, I think he would probably take back the whole, do you foresee a time when Lennon McCartney becomes an active songwriting team again? But he's just expressing how he's feeling, right then as well. So, I mean, I don't know really if you should be down on him, like, some people get down on Lennon for some of the mean things that he had said as well, because that's just how he was feeling at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of things about. It seems to come down to three questions. So, is this album a rest away from the Beatles or the start of a solo career? And he says, time will tell. Being a solo album means it's the start of a solo career, and not being done with the Beatles means it's just a rest. That's very non-controversial and non-committal. But then, interesting, the next question then says, is your break with the Beatles temporary or permanent? Which is actually a bit of a stretch considering the previous answer.
Right.
And then, do you foresee a time when Lennon and McCartney become an active songwriting partnership again? No. Again, you could take that as they hadn't really been an active partnership. I think they were up to maybe Sgt. Pepper, because I know for sure, and Hunter Davis confirmed this, that they were writing, they were having these famous 3-hour writing sessions.
Right.
Up to about Pepper. I don't think beyond that they did that much.
No.
It doesn't seem like a really big deal, this thing. So it was very interesting. Obviously, was it the Evening Standard that broke the story, or Daily Express? I can't remember. Paul quits the Beatles.
I think it was the Evening Standard. Yeah. Was it
the Evening Standard? Yeah. That, wonder if it was Maureen Cleave. No, it wasn't Maureen Cleave. She'd done by then, actually. So it's a bit of a stretch. I always found this very weird. He says the Beatle thing is over and no one seems to bat an eyelid. And then
Right.
there's something very vague, and it's on the front
page, yeah.
I wonder, do you guys know, have we had it confirmed who actually wrote those questions out?
I think it was Peter
Yes,
Brown.
Peter Brown did.
Yeah. I mean, there's also people out there to think that Derek Taylor may have had a hand.
Well, maybe Derek. Maybe Derek
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, I mean, there's different things, there's different stories out there, but I think it was Peter Brown who
Did it?
gets the credit for that. So,
I think,
but yeah,
I think either way though, whether he wrote them out, obviously Paul would have had to have cleared it. So
oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, those are his answers too to go with it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Paul actually had a hand in some of these questions as well.
Yeah. He could have said, I didn't write the questions, I just wrote the answers. Me,
Right.
Yeah, it's obviously, I mean, again, I find myself defending Paul now and again when I talk to people, because he's got stuck with this image, which is so kind of, everything he does is calculating. Some people would say, this depression he had, maybe he didn't have it, or it's some kind of thing to make him look cool. And I don't agree with that. I think yes, he has a certain way about him where things have become a bit of a performance. But he's been Paul McCartney. He's been Paul McCartney for like 50 years or more now. It's almost going to be natural. So I can't remember what the original question was.
No, we were just talking about the whole press release, anyways. So, but yeah, I mean, there's bits in it, but I don't think there's nasty. I don't know if anybody really considers this to be a nasty piece, but it's just.
Actually,
Excuse me.
I read something somewhere that actually Paul wrote the questions himself.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised because they're really there's simple questions. Simple answers.
I have to forget where it was, but yeah, he wrote those questions himself. I'm almost positive.
Right.
I don't think anybody else did it.
Right. Well, the story is Peter Brown.
That's the version of it. I think he really just did it himself and saying, just throw your name on this, but I really did this to just tell the world I'm done.
Yeah, I think no, go ahead.
No, I wonder if some of it was actually just the fact that Paul stole his thunder as well, because as you know, he's a bit kind of known for that, the LSD interview. I mean, Paul actually, it turns out from the Riding So High book that Paul actually took LSD a bit earlier than we thought. Apparently it was December 65.
Right.
Which kind of changes things a bit, because that means he'd done it by the time of Revolver,
Mm-hmm.
But I still think, as George sort of says in the anthology, we've been trying to get him to take it for like a year.
Sonny's taking it, he's on TV talking about it, which I think was one of his worst PR moments myself.
But I think there might have been. I think you have to remember there's a sort of sibling rivalry, although they're not.
Oh, absolutely.
But
John defended him 2 years later. They did that interview, and I don't know if you've seen that clip. I think it's with I don't know if it's David Frost or whatever, but John defended him, saying they went after him, and he told them that's your responsibility not to print this and publish this, and they did it anyway.
Right.
So it was nice to see them, actually defended him there, even though he probably was like, we were way ahead of you with this, but I'll defend you.
Right.
It's weird of Paul to think that, though, because he's a newspaper person. Can you really go to a newspaper and say, I'm going to give you this huge scoop, but it's up to you whether you publish it or not.
That's the whole part that just cracks me up the most about that whole bit. You've got the responsibility.
You're the one that's saying it. So
right, exactly.
Okay.
So, but anyways, so about a week after this interview, you got John in I think it was in Disc and Music Echo, I believe it's called. So being real macho male, breakup here. Paul hasn't left. I sacked him, which is definitely like the big alpha male kind of response that you would see after a breakup like that. So, I mean, do you think that? I mean, I just think that's really typical John comment there, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of ego going on there. The sibling rivalry.
Right.
I wonder if he gave Paul any redundancy money. That would have been a fun one. Who got the children, as another podcast was saying. Well, of course we know, don't we? Michael Jackson and well, Lou, who was it? Lou Grade originally got the children. But
Right.
anyway.
Oh yes, yes.
I just feel like it's a macho ego thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
There's much more in that, really.
Yeah. So McCartney is then released. Not much going on. Later in the year, then we get the big Rolling Stone interview from December of '70 with. Well, didn't Paul do Rolling Stone as well? Was it late '69 or was it early '70?
Paul?
Yeah. Wasn't he on the cover of Rolling Stone there too?
It's on that site right now, which is a great site, by the way. BeatlesInterviews.org. I forgot about this one.
Yeah, it's great. Isn't it? Yeah.
Great site.
Yeah.
Great site. 69, 70, Beatles split. I don't know.
Okay, we'll have to go back to that. But again, a lot of interesting comments going there. I mean, it just seemed like there was just a lot of built up in John wanting to get these comments. I don't know if it was much Jan getting, was kind of psyching John up or kind of like egging him on a little bit, to get these comments out of John. But there's a couple that stand out that we'll talk about right now. And obviously the first one, what did you think of Paul's McCartney? And I thought Paul's was rubbish. I think he'll make a better one when he's frightened into it, so
when he's
right
scared
there.
into it. That was
Right.
always it, which kind of
Right.
was true.
Yeah, and I think he mentions that again too, on whether it was a Dick Cavett show or something like that. He that's kind of like his go-to comment, when he's frightened into it, So, but let's see another one. What was Paul's reaction when you said you were leaving? So, like anybody, when you say divorce, the face goes all sorts of colors. It's like when he knew that this was the final thing, and then 6 months later he comes out with whatever. A lot of people knew I left. I was fool not to do it, not to do what Paul did, which was use it to sell a record. Another one, you were really angry at Paul. No, I wasn't angry. Well, when he come, this is where I think Jan is kind of trying to like to hang him on a little bit, trying to, hey, let's get some juicy stuff here, Well, when he came out with his I'm leaving, no, I wasn't angry. I was just shit. He's a good PR man. I mean, he's about the best in the world, probably. He does a really good job. And then, the whole PR thing, to sell the record, Sam, I'm quitting to sell a record. You go on record saying that you think John's a pretty good PR guy himself, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I'd say around the 1980 period, because that's I won't go into it now, but you'll know if you've listened to any of my show that I'm constantly trying to discover what the truth is there. But yeah, I mean, John's big porky pie, as we say in England. His big lie was to say that he didn't play any music for 5 years.
Which, as we know, was just a whole lot of unfinished started projects, really.
Yeah.
The funny thing with John, you get so much of one extreme or the other. Double Fantasy. I mean, I think there were like works of inspiration. I think in Bermuda, he was inspired, but
right.
It's almost the opposite of inspiration. Is that he's actually piecing together bits from 2 or 3 years. But basically, I think if you watch the Andy Peebles, listen to the Andy Peebles interview again, John and Yoko are just, either it's the truth, or they're very good actors, or they're just people who've been in the public eye for years and have got good at that kind of thing. That they're just playing the happy couple so brilliantly that maybe it's true, but then when you find out the thing about, I didn't play music for 5 years, that calls into question everything else, right?
Right.
Then when you find out one thing is a total lie, then you're suddenly thinking, well, maybe everything else is, or some of it. So basically, I mean, John knew how to play the game. There's a part of May Pang's book, Loving John, which I haven't read for years, but the bit I always remembered was something really awful had happened, like he'd gone ballistic when he was drunk or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and then the next day he did like a radio interview for Mind Games.
Right.
Just clicked back straight into the charismatic, great answers, John Lennon. She said she couldn't believe how quickly he could switch. So essentially, he was good as well. I think Paul could be the best PR guy ever, but then he's made some PR gaffes. You know, I mean, how many has he made?
Right.
It's a drag, the LSD thing. So
Oh, absolutely. But you can't, you can't, but I mean, you gotta admit, I mean, yeah, there's some really great signs of brilliance. I mean, especially when he's kind of like given the leadership role after the whole, John's Jesus comments. He's pretty much the one taking the reins, with all of those interviews, and he just sounds so confident. In all those press interviews, when they direct questions to John, but then yet Paul is taking the lead on all of these, all of these questions. And it's just really, if you haven't listened to a lot of these, these little press releases, I definitely recommend you guys just, type in, Paul or Beatle interviews and just find the 66 ones when you really hear Paul. I think that's really also too when Paul just he's a good songwriter, but then he just transforms into this just amazing maybe the best of all time. I mean, right around that time, and he's just kind of like it's almost like he found himself, after this confidence of, being, given the lead to take care of all of these questions, because his buddy is kind of like he's got the chink in the armor. Now it's up to Paul to kind of like save the day, and I think he does it brilliantly.
That's the bond there. The brotherhood, sticking up for each other, and he's gonna. No, he did that very well.
Oh, he did it brilliantly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he just came into his own. I think maybe John just peaked slightly earlier.
Yes, I agree.
I don't know, confidence of being a public figure, and it just happened to coincide that, John started getting too much into LSD and went on a mission to destroy his ego. I think that bit was true.
Yeah, but to your point though, with John and Yoko, because you'll see a lot of interviews in late '69 and early '70 too, when those two are really gelled at that point in time, and a lot of their interviews just are really flow very smoothly, and they handle the questions brilliantly a lot of times throughout those.
John and Yoko.
Yeah, John and Yoko. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that their relationship was totally genuine up to.
Yeah, they were synced for sure.
For sure. I think it was, I mean, there was that incident that happened on the day that Nixon got reelected, and John took a girl in the next room and all that. They probably never recovered from that. And then they'd had 5 years in each other's pockets and split up. I kind of buy everything up to then. It's just the last couple of years I don't totally buy. But yeah, they were so in sync. And I think, as I said earlier, I think John and Yoko possibly were both looking for that one person. John was always looking for that one person who would tick all of his boxes, And he had, he had various soulmates, Pete Shotton, Stuart Sutcliffe, Paul, and Yoko. Probably just those four, really. Maybe Harry Nilsson, but
maybe Ringo to a lesser extent too.
Yeah.
But then in December 31st, you got of 7, you got McCartney suing the other 3 to dissolve the Beatles, and a lot of sound bites come through that as well. But we're not really going to handle the court side of the relationship. Maybe we can handle that for another show or something like that. But it's not till like really 71 when Paul here we got the other. You got the other Life magazine. April 71, where you get some really interesting sound bites from Paul as well.
Yeah, you got to hear the whole Beatle thing. It was like all those years ago, like going back a distance more than anything.
Right.
The whole point, the Beatles are really finished, over with, and it's just each of us alone now, living our lives the way we choose. I think while the Beatles were on, I can't really use any other word. While they were just on, it was So he's, it's more the same quotes, but more final. Of course.
Right.
The bit I thought was interesting, he said, by the time we made Abbey Road, John and I were openly critical of each other's music.
Yes.
John wasn't much interested in performing something that he hadn't written himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty candid. I mean, he's not really holding back. Maybe it's kind of years later he started to a bit more.
Yeah, some other stuff here. I ignored John's interview in Rolling Stone. I looked at it and dug him for saying what he thought, meaning him always being truthful, but to me, sort of getting it off his chest, I think it blows it what that kind of thing. I think it makes people wonder why John needs to do that, which was kind of interesting. To go on, I don't think there were an awful lot of inconsistencies, because on one page you find John talking about how Dylan changed his name from Zinnerman and how that's hypocritical because John changed his name to John Ono Lennon, and people looking at that just being to think, come on, what is this?
And he said, the other one I've got is the Beatle thing was fantastic. I loved every minute of it, but it was very sheltered.
Mm-hmm.
And then he talks about, imagine someone telling you what to do and where to be all the time,
Right.
Which,
Right. He does do his little dig on, preaching practices, but we'll get to that bit when we actually get to too many people here in a few minutes. But not a bad interview from Paul. I mean, it's pretty interesting.
A lot of good sound bites in that one.
Yeah.
It's just endless, isn't it? You're talking about like Beatles interviews appearing online. I check every now and again on YouTube, and they just keep coming. Like, I mean, we've seen the major ones, obviously, but there's these little interviews just keep appearing online. It's like,
right.
It just seems like
it's endless. It's endless.
It's
and then they just changed the whole outlook of that scene. I mean, we were trained to think one thing, but then you get like this little soundbite, and it just completely changes your view on that whole thing. It's just.
I'm gonna guess. Have you guys heard of that channel Breathless 345?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah, you know that. Yeah, I actually contacted him. He said he might do a talk sometime later in the year, but he's busy or something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, we tried to get him on.
Did you? Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, just if any listeners haven't heard of that, I mean, such a great series of documentaries.
Very well done.
Yeah.
Brilliantly done. All just, I presumably he just took everything is readily available clips and he just put them together.
Edited them all together. Really done very well.
Yeah, and then the music, I mean, he's had to change how you hear the music probably for copyright issues.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, job well done, especially his 5-part McCartney.
Oh yeah, we watched that over the summer, Tom and I. That was well done.
Yeah,
that was good. Yeah. Very good. It looks like he's got some new ones out because he's put some trailers.
Right.
He's got a video called John Lennon Middle Class Hero, which I thought was quite funny, and something about macho pretense. So I think he's going to do a documentary about John fairly soon.
And we'll welcome that for sure. Absolutely. Anything we can learn, please bring it on. Yeah. So that was April. So then now May of '71, Ram is released. We'll talk about a couple songs here where John has gone on record saying that obviously these, listen to this, obviously these songs are about me, but he doesn't release the lyrics, so you can't really tell. When did Paul finally release lyrics for what, Andy? Was it Band on the Run?
Red Rose Speedway.
Red Rose Speedway was the first time he released the lyrics after John gave him a hard time.
Yeah. Paul, I put the lyrics on my albums. Paul doesn't put the lyrics on his album.
Right.
Speedway.
Were other people putting lyrics on their albums, around that time? It still wasn't really normal practice, was it?
Good question.
It wasn't a standard, I suppose. George included him on All Things.
Yeah, All Things Must Pass. True. Right, yeah. Those were on the album, album sleeves. Yeah.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. So John was still doing it. Paul didn't bring it back till then '73. George, I do recall a couple.
Think about their acts. I can't think. I don't think there's any lyrics on any Stones albums of those periods.
Yeah, I think Simon Garfunkel. I have to go back, and I think Simon Garfunkel were doing it.
Right.
Too many. 69. Wasn't obviously didn't become a thing until later, maybe.
I think come the mid '70s, I think it was more a common practice then.
Yeah, because I mean, a great deal of the music I listen to, or my favorite music, is from the '60s to early '70s.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember Led Zeppelin or the Doors or Jimi Hendrix having.
Yeah, no lyrics, nothing.
I think it was just another dig.
So the first song that leads off Ram, Too Many People, I think that was this was the biggest of the four. Because Paul has gone on record saying that, yeah, this was the one that was actually about
John.
John. Yeah. The first line in question, that was your first mistake. You took your lucky break and broke it in two. Obvious. I think if there's any obvious ding at John, I think that's definitely the first one. I mean, Andy, what are your thoughts on that?
I will listen. Do I think? Yeah, I think it's obviously it's can't be more blunt than that. And
Right.
it's something that Paul kind of dabbles his toe in with being blunt, whereas something was John was much more comfortable doing that. I love the sound clips of John singing the song and going through it. I'm sure Anthony's.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
And he's like, I love those clips when actually the reporter asks him about Ram and he starts singing the songs,
Right.
So and he's like, well, what lucky break? Who's lucky break? What lucky break is he talking about?
Right.
I love that.
But yeah, one radio documentary, they've actually put Paul singing the song on the line on the recording along with John singing it in this interview.
Oh,
really?
Just desperate to have John and Paul singing together. Because obviously it doesn't make any sense, but
wow, I have to listen to that.
Yeah. There's your Beatles song right there, huh?
Because...
yeah. But even, I mean, it's later in the album. Lennon even thought the backseat of my car was about him.
Right. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second too. Yeah.
Right. That was all of it. But Too Many People, of course, was the one. And even Paul admits it now.
Yeah. And then the second main line, too many people preaching practices. Don't let them tell you what you want to be. Now, Anthony, you studying John, what was Lennon preaching back then?
I suppose, where are we? 71.
Yeah.
I don't think he was involved with the New Left. Maybe he was, because he did it. When was
Red
he?
Red Mole.
Yeah.
It's like September. Well, right before he left England, really. Power to the People. So like summer of 71.
Yeah. So when did Ram actually come out?
May of 71. Yeah.
May. So I would say, it was more. I guess the peace campaign is still political, isn't it? He was essentially kind of using the establishment media against themselves. Talking to what we call now the mainstream media.
Right.
About overthrowing the mainstream. I don't know, the authorities. I think maybe it's the music, perhaps, because on Plastic Ono Band, I mean, he even says, if you want to be a hero, then just follow me.
Me, right.
Which makes it sound very weird when he's saying, working class hero is not about me or blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
I think just they seem to be always on TV. I had my mum on my podcast, actually, which was really nice.
Oh, wow.
Basically talking about how the 60s was really boring if you weren't in London or San Francisco. she did say that obviously in those days you didn't have the saturation. She said every time you saw John and Yoko, it always seemed to be some kind of slogan.
Mm-hmm.
And they always looked outrageous. And my mum said in the kind of suburban setting that she grew up in,
right,
they would tend to say, "Oh, he just wants attention or anything." So I suppose, they're preaching peace, really. I mean, that doesn't seem like a bad thing, but I suppose
no, exactly.
The idea of turning their life into kind of sloganeering, turn their honeymoon into a peace event, obviously.
Yeah, yep.
I don't know. I mean, the rest of the lyrics, there's all stuff about a piece of cake. I didn't quite know what that meant, but you took your lucky break and broke it in two. I don't know. It's obviously again about someone, but I wonder whether songwriters often write about themselves and couch it in language that's attacking someone else. I don't know.
Right.
Very vague.
Right. And then, just the whole preaching practices thing, how Paul felt maybe at that point in time. We all know that now. I mean, what is he preaching? I mean, obviously he's preaching, vegetarianism, and some other stuff as well. One of the things that, I'm a vegetarian too, not because of Paul or anything like that, but there's the one thing where he had his shirt on with its say no thanks to turkey, so it was usually his Thanksgiving a shirt. So I can see Paul now I think someone should write a song about in Paul now, maybe preaching practices. But the funny thing is, though, going back to that April 71 Life magazine, he's quoted saying, "But we're not strict. I don't want to put a big sign on me, thou shalt be a vegetarian." You know, so that's how he felt in 71. Obviously, we now know how he feels now,
Well,
you know, about it, you know, so.
It does seem a bit of a shame, though, that when people in the public eye are trying to change things for the better, they get knocked so much.
Right.
It seems a
I
shame.
mean, it's people's naivety, you know. I think, you know, a lot of people are naive to, or they fear change, you know, as well. You know, everybody has their own routine, and they're scared of that being changed, you know. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. And
yeah.
I think John, when he was into the anti-war stuff, one of the points he made is that we all support war. You know, we pay our taxes and we're essentially supporting war. That doesn't mean we're pro-war, but I think sometimes if you get too near to too far down the rabbit hole, you're going to end up saying stuff that the average citizen is not going to like, because it's like,
Right.
oh, shit, you know, I am supporting war. I'm not
Right.
intentionally, I'm not trying to encourage war, but it's that kind of thing. But I as a person, I do have a kind of activistic side to me for sure. And just think it's a shame that a lot of people just leap on celebrities for trying to change things, and they call them a do-gooder, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember earlier this year, or actually early in the COVID days, you know, all these celebrities doing washing hand videos. Like,
Oh, yeah.
really, do we need you to tell us how to wash our hands?
right.
But
No.
I mean, it's nice of you, thank you, but I'm good. You know?
here's a special hand washing technique.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, too, just thinking back to too many people, is it piece of cake or piss off?
Oh,
It's off cake.
I mean, you can hear it. You can hear it either way.
I've always
You know?
read that that's always kind of a double meaning that he slid in there. You know, is he leading the album off with, "Hey,
Right.
John"?
Well, if you listen to Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix, when he says, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky,"
Yeah,
it's
everybody says this.
like, "Excuse me while I kiss this
It's
guy."
this guy.
Exactly the same, and I'm not saying there's any hidden meaning there.
No,
Right.
it's just however you interpret it.
Jimmy had plenty of girls to kiss, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe even Linda at one point, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Next song, Three Legs. Now this one, you know, I don't think Paul has really ever come out and said anything about this one, but this one, if you know, listen to Rumor, it's more about, you know, 3-on-1, you know, the other three versus Paul. In one of the lyrics that I highlighted, when I thought you was my friend, you know, and then the end of that is, but you let me down, you know, put my heart around the bend, you know, so meaning the three of them kind of, you know, sticking it to Paul. And I think this is more like a Alan Klein situation, you know, myself, you know, with the 3-to-1 aspect of that.
Just to backtrack slightly, the last interview we were talking about, he was very, very clear about Klein.
Oh, absolutely.
And in the self-interview, he talked
Right.
about, has Abco got anything to do with your album or something? Not if I can help it. He's very clear about that.
Absolutely, yeah. With the press, yeah, the McCartney press release, I believe that was, right.
The one we were talking about. But
Yeah.
in a funny way, a lot of the Paul is Dead clues are about, the other three are wearing a certain color of carnation, and Paul has got his back to the camera.
Black.
But if you think, and Paul's got his back to the camera and they're all facing the camera. But I was thinking about this. I think there was quite often a 3-against-1 thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, even weirdly, going back to Hamburg, there's a letter that Stu Sutcliffe wrote, possibly to his sister or his mother, that said, Paul is the black sheep of this trip. Everyone hates him. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not saying, everybody hated him, but I think,
right.
If you think about it, Paul was the only one who stayed in London.
Right.
He was the longest. He was a bachelor for the longest. And I'd say he was also the only one. He's the only one who had a quote unquote posh girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
probably
Right.
the other
Jane.
three had sort of very middle class pretensions.
Right.
I think you get quite a bit when you get a bunch of working class lads and they all become famous. You might find that one or two of them get into the kind of trying to be a bit more posh or a bit more like that. So I feel like perhaps there was always a bit of a pull against the other three, but I'm sure you could find evidence where it's George against the other three as well.
Oh, yeah, like they said in the anthology, I thought it was you three.
Yeah. 55,000, 75,000, 35,000.
Yeah, I think they probably all felt that in the last couple of years that at some point the other three are connected and I'm not. So
Yeah.
Right.
I think the 3 legs thing, something about he's got 3 legs but can't run.
Right. My dog, he got 3 legs. Your dog, he got none. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I never took that one as a jab at Lennon. I never heard that song as a Lennon jab.
No, not necessarily Lennon jab, but just more or less the 3 versus 1 aspect of it.
Or it could mean that the Beatles are useless with only 3 of them.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that as well. Yeah, my dog, he got 3 legs, but he can't run. Yeah. Which is interesting. Yeah. Moving on. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, all I was going to say was, which album was it that had a photo of 2 Beatles?
Oh, well, that's the Ram. Yeah, that's I was going to bring that up right here. So
right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, obviously he felt that he was getting screwed by the
Yeah.
So
The only
interesting.
time he ever really showed that raw honesty, emotion on a record, he would never be so forthcoming about how he felt ever again on a record in terms of his relationships with the Beatles. I don't think.
Yeah, for the most part, you'll get a song or two here and there, but
maybe. But in terms of his whole vibe at the time was like, okay, I sat back, I took all this shit. Now I'm going to come back and give it to you. Like I'm pissed off. Right,
because then you got during the Beatles, you got him. It seemed like taking the lead after Brian.
I'm holding it together. I'm holding it together. I'm holding it together. You don't want me. Okay, fine.
Right.
Now it's over. Now I'm going to come out swinging. That to me, that's the essence of what Ram is to me.
I think this image of kind of holding back all the time, I think that applies to much later. Maybe at a certain point he just had enough and he wasn't going to let the press in too much.
Right.
I feel like that probably maybe his 80s and 90s. I don't know. Or maybe it was after John died. Who knows? But from kind of looking at these interviews that I've been looking at before this talk, he seems pretty candid most of the time. It doesn't seem like he's holding back too much.
Oh no, he still is happy-go-lucky self. I think. I mean, and then I think part of that is due to his strong relationship with Linda, But there was also a lot of insecurities, inside of him too, especially, his playing. I think his writing, in some points, but to that point, I mean, I think it holds true for both of them, really. I mean, they're both. I mean, you hear Lennon, during the I forgot what song it was during the Imagine sessions. You got him asking, "Hey, how do you like the song? Is it up to yesterday's standards?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, he's always got Paul in the back of his mind,
Yeah, I think I was telling you when we chatted the other day. There's a bit of the Imagine film where John's proposing something. I can't remember what it is. Phil Spector said, "Are you sure about that?" And John said, well, Paul did that on his last album.
Right.
And Phil Spector says, "You're quoting Paul, are you?" And he's like, "Yeah, well, just for example,
Right.
It's very funny.
It is really fun. It's funny and it's really interesting. This whole relationship.
Fascinating to kind of just dive into. Not to just too much psychoanalysis, but it's amazing. You think about how many levels you can explore. You can explore it on a very superficial level, or you can kind of choose to go a little deeper with it. You can kind of interpret it any way you want. How deep do you want to go into?
We'll be here in 30 years if we're still alive. We'll still be here doing our podcast.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So moving on to the next song, Dear Boy, which again, another song that John thinks is about him. Obviously, Paul has gone on record saying this is about Linda's ex. However, excuse me, some of these lyrics I could understand how John might think it's about him. Right off the bat, the very first lyric, I guess you never knew, dear boy, what you have found. Meaning, John, you're gonna miss me. I mean, I was your meal ticket, or something like that.
Lennon's psyche was probably so attuned to this record. He probably thought every little word of this record, he was going to take it apart and say, is he talking about me? Right. He might have thought Smile Away was a song about him, or, so it's not impossible to imagine Lennon sitting there listening to Ram, right, line by line, track by track, going, is that one about me? Is that one about me?
Right. I actually believe in astrology, but when you read your horoscopes, you read the horoscopes, and if you could take any sign and you can more or less interpret it to your life. You know what I mean? You can read Aries, and it says, you've recently had this in your life. And you're like, oh, wow, I've recently had that. How did they know? But I must say, I don't know Ram as well as you guys. Obviously, I know the songs fairly well. But I was listening today, and I must say, some of the lyrics are pretty weird. They don't seem to make much narrative sense. Just to critique it for a second.
As in a song that could be about John?
Just kind of in general.
Just in general? Okay, fair enough.
I mean, all I was going to say was that you can interpret that as very cleverly veiled metaphors, right, or just nonsensical lyrics. Who knows? It could be both, could be either. I mean, I am a songwriter, and I do remember that, because I haven't written for a while, but the last time I was writing an album, when you write a song, you get a lyric in your head and you think, yeah, that's about that person. But in the end, you could almost say that everything is about you.
Right.
Where you deliver it.
What John has gone on then, which we'll get into, when we talk about another particular song a little later in the show,
Yeah. Which song would that be? I can't imagine.
Well, it's from Imagine, for sure.
I kind of like it. If this was about John, it's kind of nice saying, dear boy,
Right.
Dear boy, you never were aware, which is kind of the same as saying you took your lucky break and broke it in two. It seems to be this thing of whether he's talking to John or kind of subconsciously talking to himself, that they didn't really realize what they had. But I don't know. I think the Beatles thing, had a good 7 or 8 years when they were, a recording band.
Right.
I think they took it as far as they could. I don't know how you feel about this, but I've had people on the show said that they're kind of pleased that the Beatles broke up when they were, because perhaps it wouldn't have been as good, And
no, absolutely.
We can debate that for the next 6 months, of course. But
of course.
Yeah, it's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things you hear on the get back sessions, because it's John and George first, that are there, and you got George presenting songs to John, and what does he say? There's too many chords. So I mean, complaining about all these chords. So could you really see John participating in 5 George Harrison songs on an album? When he feels that way, So interesting stuff. But another one too, the last verse, I hope you never know, dear boy, how much you missed. Even when you fall in love, dear boy, it won't be half as good as this. So you can take that as, even, falling in love with Yoko, it's not going to be as good as the relationship that we had.
You could interpret it that way, sure.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure about that. I don't know if you'd take it that far.
No, but I mean, you can see, I think you can see how John might interpret it that way.
So Paul has actually said this is about Linda's ex, or is that
something? Yeah.
Right.
No, he's going on record saying it is about Linda's ex. Absolutely.
Not for a long time, though.
No, it took a while. Yeah.
Well, his stories do evolve a bit, don't they?
Maybe he's doing his own version of revisionism or whatever. Who knows? But then moving on to the last track, Backseat of My Car. And really the only thing in question here, I believe, is We Believe That We Can't Be Wrong, which we hear John, doing in a soundbite, singing, we believe what you can't be wrong. What do you mean by that? How, and who is he questioning about that? Who was wrong,
Yeah.
Is it Linda? Is Paul and Linda believe they can't be wrong for what they're doing, or
has Paul ever commented on this or not?
Not that I'm aware of. No,
not that I've read, or none,
right.
But again, the song goes back to the Let It Be, Get Back sessions, so it has origins.
Yeah, he's played on the piano, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems to be a song about teenagers kind of bunking up in the back of the car.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's all it really is. I don't think it's, but again, John,
Paul, Linda versus the world, really.
Oh yeah, John's look at it is like okay, everything on this is about me. So
right, but then again, they didn't have the lyrics, so he didn't know.
No.
Yeah, they couldn't hear them.
Right. Yeah.
I do like this idea. So I just to say, I do like this idea that Paul and Linda used to go out on long drives in the country, and Linda would say, "Should we just get lost on the road?"
Right.
Part of Paul's thinking, "Well, I'd like to know more or less where I am."
Exactly.
Let's drive, man. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Kind of hippie.
Right.
I love it. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which absolutely. Then a couple weeks later, you get Lennon reacting to the release of Ram. Here, he's quoted saying, "I enjoyed a couple, like the little bit of My Dog, It's Got Three Legs."
Yeah.
But then he goes on saying, "I don't like all that dribble pop opera jazz," which is I like that funny line. I like pop records that are pop records, so interesting.
But John Lennon said, "I like pop records that are pop records."
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't quite gel with what before that.
Right, exactly.
He got very, very minimalist period. I mean,
right, and that,
so
and that if people are interested, that's in the Lennonology book right there. So, very good source of Lennon material.
It certainly is.
Earlier, it's on the list. The
yes,
it's getting higher and higher, but it's
exactly. The shelves just keep expanding and expanding. But then now in September, we move forward to September '71. You get the release of Imagine. Then you also get 2 days later after it's released, you get John and Yoko on the Dick Cavett Show. But Andy, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay, I thought you had your okay.
No.
But so Imagine gets released. So you don't really hear a lot of built up from John in between the release of Ram to Imagine, because Andy, as you said, busy guy. I mean, at the time he's recording. He's dealing with the stuff with Kyoko. Yoko's relationship. I mean,
their lives were so. That's going on. He's getting ready to leave England for the last time and gets to New York and just it's literally off the plane and he meets up with Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman.
Well, Aunt Mimi famously said on one of the documentaries that from when John Lennon was a boy, he never wasted a single moment. He was always reading, writing, doing poetry.
Right.
Dan Richter, who's been on my show, lived with him for a couple of years. He said, the creative thing was just going all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one of the reasons that he smoked pot was actually just to
calm down. Yeah.
So I think he was just kind of all action
all the time.
Right.
Always going on.
Life,
Yeah. So then, you got all this built up angst on Paul, wrapped up into one song, which, I mean, a lot of it's written by John, but you got probably the biggest dig, written by Alan Klein. But, you got John just going on record saying, these were funny lines. I thought this was just a funny song. It's a good track, but and to add insult to injury, you got another Beatle on the record, so playing some of his best guitar work ever really on here as well.
Pretty damn good. Can I just mention Crippled Inside just for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
I mean, just to say that, again, there's been some talk that was about Paul. And again, it's about like presenting a facade. You shine your shoes, wear a suit, blah, blah, blah. But you can't hide when you're crippled inside. Again, I think that's very non-specific. And I think a lot of it may have been John, again, kind of talking to himself.
Right.
But I love that song. It's never going to be there with the top John Lennon.
And it's almost kind of like polish in the music as well. I mean, really don't hear a lot of John doing that kind of music on his records.
No.
Yeah, well, there's even a bit where he's talking to on one of the Imagine documentaries, because there's a lot connected to the project now. He's sort of talking to Tariq Ali, and he's going, "Oh, I've just written this song. You can shine your shoes and wear a suit." So he's kind of almost mocking his own song.
Yeah.
Throwing it to someone. I would just say I can't think that's just about Paul. It's so universal.
Right.
Everybody, all of us in polite society, we all hide what's going on.
Right.
Because you have to behave. You try and be as natural as you can, but
everybody wears a mask.
You got to play a role, haven't you?
Yeah. But I mean, it is interesting too. Yeah, I think. But who knows? Maybe that song could be about John as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's amazing though how quickly by 74 he's on interviews talking about how do you sleep is about himself, and he's totally not
right
in that same spot that he was 3 years prior.
Exactly.
He said that about Steel and Glass, which is very interesting from Walls and Bridges, because it's almost the same as How Do You Sleep?
Yeah, exactly.
An obvious dig at someone, obviously Klein in this case.
Right, and there's an interview there too that I actually listened to it last night, where he's talking about Steel and Glass. I think he calls it Glass and Steel at first, and then John has to correct him, and he says, like, in a way, it's like part 2 of How Do You Sleep, and is that directed towards Paul? And he goes, no, that's not really directed towards anybody, which I think we all know now that was more of a dig on Alan Klein.
Yeah,
because Steel and Glass is about the building, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So, let's go ahead.
How Do You Sleep?
Let's talk about a few lines on here, which, those freaks were right when they said you was dead. Adding more fuel to that whole, McCartney is dead fire, which, I don't know how you feel about that. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. A lot of people actually believe McCartney is dead. I don't put any effort into any of those, claims, or I don't listen to anybody's. If anybody believes in it, it's kind of stuff I kind of just ignore it. So I don't know how you feel about that either. So
I just think it's very interesting. My main counter, I mean, as you'll know, I don't discount conspiracy theories.
Right, I know.
Get boxed for it, of course. But I think the main one is that if you think about those Twickenham sessions, if you had a replacement, I've listened through God knows how many hours of those Nagra reels. That would mean that every time they went back to a childhood story, Billy Shepherd or whoever would have to have been coached
on it. Yep.
I don't believe in it, but I think it's a very interesting lesson in hidden meanings or hidden things, because it is amazing. It's 2 hours documentary worth of evidence, if you want to call it that. It's very fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I look at this line kind of like almost like the same as here's another clue for you all. The walrus is Paul. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something like that. It's a silly line. Don't really make much of it. You live with straights who tell you was king, and then there's, I'll get to what Paul's response to that, which is actually pretty funny.
So what?
What's that? Yeah, I know. Exactly. My kids are straights.
Right.
Yeah.
A friend of mine came up with a theory that line, those straights. So sorry. The next line, jump when your mama tells you.
Right, which I was going to get to next, but go ahead. Yeah. What were your
I
thoughts
was going to say his theory was that it was about the fact that he'd had a dream about Let It Be, wrote a song about it.
Right.
Because your mother told you to let it be, you wrote a song.
Oh, wow.
Right, yeah. And I would have thought that if there was one thing that they wouldn't touch, you keep away from, is the whole mom aspect. You know what I mean? Because they share that.
That's right.
Exactly. So I would have thought if there was like one topic that is like taboo, you just stay away from. It's each other's moms, really.
Yeah,
so, but but he had that that relationship, that really good relationship with his mom before she passed. And John didn't have that. So I mean, I can understand that. However, you just stay away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a few things to say about this. obviously you must have seen the Give Me Some Truth documentary.
Yeah, right.
There's a bit where he's showing George the song on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
Time he sings one of those lines, he looks up to George with a smile. And you can't really see George's reaction, but
right.
as you said, you know, that guitar George plays is intentionally stinging.
Yes.
Like it's beyond stinging, you know. It's,
right.
And then, of course, you'll probably know this as well. Ringo was there. And
well,
John, you know, lay off after
that's
a while.
enough.
That's right. I think that's becoming more rumor than a possibility. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Maybe I can see Ringo doing something like that, but I mean, there's no really hard evidence on that, really.
There is no evidence, but I'm inclined to believe it's true, unless we have, you know, Mark find out that when the particulars, the where, when, and
right,
why.
Right. Yeah, but when are we going to get that from him? You know, another 30 years from now.
Waiting for Mark Lewison to get to 1971.
Yes. Yes. Because he said he's going up to 70. He said he's going up to 75, right, or 6.
Well, if you're going to do a song about the Beatles, a story about the Beatles, you kind of have to do that until until Apple ends, don't you?
Right, which I think is why he's going to go that. He's going to go that far, I think.
Does Mark Lewis? Can I ask a question? Does Mark Lewison have a son or daughter?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Somebody to carry on the reins after.
Exactly. Sean's taken over the Yoko.
Yeah, Yoko, right, exactly.
Guardian of the Flame kind of thing. So
I wonder, you know, and I wonder if he involves Julian in any aspect of that.
Sean.
Know? Sean, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, yeah.
Because I think he would actually consider that, you know, before Yoko would even imagine considering it, you know.
Yeah.
So, but the only thing, you know, so here's the Alan Klein bit. You know, the only thing you done was the only thing you've done was yesterday. Since you've gone, it's just another day. You know, again, I mean, that might be the funniest part of it. You know, obviously, you know, Paul commented on that too. You know, but here again, you've got, like Andy, like you pointed out, you know, he gets to New York and then he's influenced by these other people. So now here, like the Rolling Stone interview, you kind of like get a sense that Jan is trying to, you know, push him to do these things, and then you got Klein kind of like, you know, influencing him, you know, influencing lyrics for this song too, you know. So he's very, you know, impressionable, I guess, maybe in a way, John, and sometimes.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so
I think that line, the only thing you've done was yesterday, is a big misstep if you're actually wanting to be taken seriously with this song.
Right.
I love this song as a rock song. I'm not a person who takes things personally with the Beatles. Like, I won't listen to this song because it's against John. You know, I don't think like that at all.
No, nor do I.
Yeah, no, good. I think it's a great song.
Well, John thought it was a good song too.
yeah. But if I was Paul and I was reading those lyrics, I might, you know, when I learn, like, what was it? The sound you make is music to my ears, which is a great line. That is a great line if you just take it just as a dig. But when you hear him sing, the only thing you've done is yesterday, that's when, if I was Paul listening to that, I'd be thinking, yeah, okay, you know that isn't true.
What she has gone on record and saying, yeah. So
it's kind of like if you have an argument with someone and someone starts screaming at you and they say stuff that maybe you know is true, and it's the kind of stuff that you normally don't say to people. Then when you start accusing you of all this other stuff that's clearly not true, then their argument goes out of the water, kind of thing. So I think it was a lashing out. One thing I didn't mention earlier with the Lennon Remembers that he'd been through primal therapy, and I've actually read The Primal Scream by Arthur Yanov.
Okay.
And all I was going to say was that primal therapy is you have to have very, very deep issues to even go to primal therapy. They wouldn't recommend it to anyone who just, you know, had like the usual angst that I guess we all have. So it just seems, a lot of lashing out.
Right. So you think this song is like an exercise in primal therapy?
I mean, I think it's just when did they finish the therapy? I think it was sort of autumn 70.
Okay.
I don't think it's the direct result, but I think he went through a couple of years of just being probably very confused, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
And it's sort of a mixture of the Beatles ending Primal Therapy. And I think John, Paul, and possibly George all pretty much had nervous breakdowns. I think at the point where they all broke down, Ringo was
Right.
obviously with alcohol.
Right.
So they'd all had just all this trauma. It was a big thing, this thing suddenly being wrenched out of your life. This band that you'd been in since you were. I mean, they actually got together in '57. Those three again.
Right. Oh,
Colin
absolutely.
had Colin Hanson on the podcast, and even the early stuff's getting revised. Like now, like the gig that we thought was Paul's first Quarrymen gig probably wasn't. And
Wow.
John almost now for certain now joined the Quarrymen in December '57. So they'd been together since then. The main three. Oh, I'm not going to say the main three, but the front three
Right.
had been together that long. So I
And,
think
and at such a young age too. At that, I mean, they
15,
pretty much.
16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
well, Paul would have been 15, John
Right.
and
Seven.
George would have been
Yeah.
14, just
14. Yeah.
14, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's just
It is. When you
not
think
quite
about
as
it.
extreme as someone like Michael Jackson, who I think just never had the chance to grow up. But
No.
there's an element of that. It wasn't as extreme as that, but
Right.
Part of
Well,
that,
I mean,
I
they
agree.
still had their childhood, really. I mean, they weren't in the camera's eye at such a early age like Michael Jackson.
that's what I mean. It's not as extreme, but
Right.
then you lose two of them lost their mothers, and perhaps in a way their childhood was wrenched away. Then
Right.
you've got to,
Well, in reality, too. I mean, what would George's mother dies in '70, and he's still relatively young, as well to lose your mom.
I mean, he was the youngest of like four, though, too.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So,
yeah.
but
It's all very
the
interesting,
song. Do you think the song is deserved? Do you think you know what I mean? Do you think John or do you think Paul deserved this song?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say they both made missteps in the preceding couple of years.
Yeah.
I think, again, I'm only guessing, but I think this sort of scene stealing that perhaps Paul was a bit guilty of.
Mm-hmm.
I think that irked John Lennon.
Oh yeah.
And I think one of the many contradictions of John Lennon was this kind of idea of I want to be an artist versus I want to sell a lot of records.
Right.
And, I know Fred Seaman is much maligned, but, other people have said this. John Lennon wanted to be a successful pop star, same as Bob Dylan wanting to be a successful pop star and make money and
Right.
have a big house. He wanted all those things. He was shallow and deep at the same time, Maybe Paul
Right.
similar, who knows? But no,
Yeah.
I don't think. I don't think it was deserved, but then I'm not sure Paul could take it too seriously with that.
Right.
The only thing you done was yesterday, which is just so clearly not true.
Yeah, exactly.
Again,
And then I think another interesting question would be, it's like, in their relationship, who threw the first stone, which I think might be a good title for this episode, First Stone. When was that first stone thrown? When did that?
November 9th, 1966.
I don't know. I mean, listen, that letter that John and Yoko found in Paul's house too, while John was going through, his fan mail. That was pretty deep too.
The hot shit thing.
Yes. Yeah. You and your Jap would think you're hot shit or something like that. Yeah.
Have you read Francis Schwartz's book though?
No.
Long time ago.
I've never read it. No.
Yeah.
That's the only evidence. I don't know. I'd just be interested to read the rest of that book and see.
Yeah. I should look into that.
I do think that was the final straw, though. That letter.
Yeah, maybe.
Possibly. But just interesting things. Lennon was asked in October of '71 about how do you sleep, and Paul's the relationship between Paul. I think things are still the same between us. Paul was and still is my closest friend except for Yoko. So for him to think in late '71 that they're still that close together, I mean, there's still evidence. There's still, I think, meetings between the two. I think they're still getting together from time to time, but just not on a regular like a normal friendship relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure how many times they actually met in the 70s.
Right. And I
We know
think
a few, obviously. I don't know if it was too regularly.
right.
I feel
No, fairly enough. And then how many times that have not been documented? Like I know,
Right.
Exactly, yeah. We don't
I've
know.
read that they shortly after How Do You Sleep came out, they sat down and
Right.
and talked. It was like,
Right.
what the hell's going on here?
Right. And I
Yeah.
think it was like after that second, on that second Dick Cavett show, he talks about seeing Paul just recently and
Yeah.
wasn't really butthurt about the "How Do You Sleep" song,
No.
So
Those Cavett shows are fantastic.
oh, they're great.
I mean, the first one, the thing I never worked out, John's wearing this jacket from
Right.
obviously the Army and Navy store, and it looks great. But like, why is he wearing an Army?
Right. I mean, is it kind of like hypocritical of him to wear,
Don't-
be for peace, but then yet would still wear an army?
That was the whole freaking influence of the radicals when he got to New York.
Right.
In my opinion,
Those Cavett interviews are amazing, though. Brilliant.
they are because you're so obsessed, write all the writing for some time in New York City and being involved in all those kind of other causes. So I think it's kind of just the persona he adopted for a while.
Right.
When he first
Yeah.
got here.
Right. And then to your point, when you said it earlier too, Anthony, about them looking or John being like nervous during that first Dick Cavett show,
Yeah.
but still able to come up with the goods. You
Yeah,
know?
he always did, but he's very kind of jerky, is the word
Right.
to use, which you find a lot. I mean, there's an interview he did on. Again, I get annoyed with this Andy Peebles. They always call it the last interview. It wasn't the last interview because
No.
he was obviously did this RKO on the day he died.
Mm.
And Goldman, again, Goldman says, "Oh, Lennon sounds coked up as he goes through his life." And obviously, a lot of people are going to reject that and say, "Oh, no, definitely not." But I mean, who knows? I mean, he does sound on that very last interview. He does sound a bit kind of wired. I'm going to say wired, which could mean
Okay,
coffee,
fair enough.
cocaine, adrenaline. I'm going to sit on the fence here, but yeah, it does seem like Dick Cavett one is a bit jerky.
Right.
But then the Andy Peebles one, he just sounds like totally sober, rational, charismatic.
Right.
So
Interesting.
who knows?
So November of 71, you got Paul in Melody Maker, which thank you, Andy, for sending that. On How Do You Sleep? I think it's a bit silly. So what if I live with straights? I like straights. I have straight babies. He says the only thing I did was yesterday, and he knows that's wrong. So it's, yeah, I mean, you can see through some of that, I'm sure. But the whole straights thing, I mean, I really don't know what he means by straight babies, whether or not they're not.
He just means you live with yes people. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all he's saying. Everybody's a yes man to Paul.
Right.
Eastman's a yes man. Linda's a yes person. Like nobody's gonna challenge him. I think is what he's getting at with that line. You live with straights who tell you you're king. So everything you do, Paul, is great, wonderful.
Right.
Well, in John Lennon's Red Mole interview, which I think we were saying earlier was maybe autumn 71, somewhere around then. Must have been probably just after, I imagine, I guess, or just before. Yeah, he's going through this period where he says Paul's very conservative, meaning small c. He's very cautious, And again, there's a little bit of the kind of teenager, even though John Lennon was 30 then, there's still a bit of the teenage rebel in him. In that, I hate straights, you people are boring, you're cautious. Right. And I think Paul's saying, yeah, but if we really dig down, you might find John Lennon was quite cautious and conservative. Ray Coleman said this, in fact, there was a very, very conservative streak to John Lennon. And that's his appeal. That's because he's everything. He's like all extremes.
He is. He's everything.
This or Tuesday is that. It's.
I kind of get just as a side, Lennon gets, of course, canonized as this figure of peace, and of course he is. But people dig a little bit deeper. There's a lot more to him than that. And I tend to believe the last years of his life, he was actually a little more conservative than more people would like to believe. That's just my own personal,
I wouldn't go as far as saying he was a Reaganite. I'm not sure.
No, but clearly exhibiting more conservative values, especially in the last few years of his life after the whole visa, becoming a citizen thing. And of course, everybody just paints a broad stroke and says, oh, he's anti-war and imagine and give peace a chance. And he was those things. But as you well know, he was a lot more of everything.
Yeah, when we had the 80th birthday just in October, I was a bit disappointed by that stuff that came out. I mean, I like the stuff with Sean and Julian. That was kind of touching.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know what was shown in the States, but in England, we had this documentary called The Last Weekend, which I think was supposed to be a play on The Last Weekend.
Yeah.
It was sort of using the Peebles interview as kind of the definitive statement. It's that very, the party line, John was really happy, da, da, da. And again, as we were saying earlier, I don't believe one extreme or the other. It's somewhere in the middle. But
meaning he was really happy during the Lost Weekend?
No, sorry. I meant the documentary was called The Last Weekend, which was a play on The Lost Weekend. But no, it was the last weekend of his life.
Gotcha.
It's about the last weekend of his life.
Right, with Andy Peebles over there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but the Peebles interview is the kind of the thing that
centerpiece of the whole thing.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, I knew it was going to happen, but I just felt that the stuff that came out in October, you knew it was going to be that, but it's the kind of very mainstream friendly version, which is fine. I understand it,
Right. Gotcha.
This is all very fascinating.
It is.
The more books we read and the more stuff that comes out, we'll be revising our opinions.
Right. And I mean, when we thought about this show too, I mean, I don't think we want to really necessarily do it in a negative way. We just want to just bring things, to light, and to show that they both did really love each other, which, is going to be even more evident down the line, especially when we get into, 1980. Some of the comments that he made that are in the, the latest Womack book, too, so, we're going to shine a lot of light on that kind of thing later on the line, but I think we're going to end it right here with How Do You Sleep, which I think is a good point to end. And then, when we get to part 2, a few months down the line, we'll bring it back to, we'll start off with, Dear Friend, and Dear Friend, and then we'll maybe take that up to when John and Yoko got back together, because there's this story that Paul told in '86 about how he helped get them back together, which isn't really acknowledged in the John.
You said that, Tom. You were smiling.
What's that?
You were smiling as you said that, Tom.
Yeah, I am because I know there's some people that get irritated with Paul. And it's like, why can't Paul just let John and Yoko have their say, or if they're tired of Paul saying, okay, well, I did this on that song, and like, okay, well, why can't you just leave it be? Well, I think he's proud of it. I think he's proud that he helped his best friend get back together with his wife. You know what I mean? So, and we'll analyze. We'll talk about that more on the next one. But Andy, let's talk about your show again. Tell people where they can find it, and your new show as well.
Yeah, so Glass Onion on John Lennon. It's on all the places you find podcasts: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, etc. The Twitter is @OnionLennon, and then the Facebook page is the same name as the podcast. And then Film Gold, it's on Facebook and Twitter, but as I said, probably by the time this goes out, I'll have the intro episode and that Christmas film that I'm not going to tell you the name of.
You send us the link to that, okay?
I will, yeah. So that'll be my second podcast. I've got so much material. Apologies to my audience if you're listening to this. You've heard me say. Are you sure
you're ready? Are you sure you can handle 2 shows?
Probably not, no. Okay. So Glass Onion will have to get precedence. So I've got some stuff coming up. We're doing this 3-parter. We did a discussion about John Lennon and Elvis Presley.
Yep.
I've got Al Sussman in the can, Gwen Womack in the can, Dan Richter again in the can, loads of stuff coming up. So
Dan Richter's going to be a fun one to listen to for sure.
Yeah, well, he's been on already, and I feel like we've become friends now because he's, as I said to him, because he's over 80, he's officially a menace to society in 2020. So he's happy for any company. So we just did a show exploring the idea of genius, because of course, for anyone who doesn't know, he was in 2001: A Space Odyssey. He's the eighth.
Yes, exactly. Throwing up the yes.
Two major claims to fame. So we talked about Stanley Kubrick, who I absolutely love as well. We talked about John Lennon, Stanley Kubrick, and the concept of genius. So that'll be coming up in a few months, I think, at this rate. But,
I take it you know the conspiracy theory with the whole landing on the moon and whether or not Kubrick filmed that or not.
I mean, my issue with that is that I think things like that are just put there to tell the world that conspiracies don't exist. And I believe powerful people conspire. That's all I'm going to say about it. But no, I don't believe that one about Kubrick faking the moon landings. But
Cool.
I think Kubrick knew quite a bit about the sort of underbelly of power, though. I'll say that much. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
It's all
Well,
films.
awesome. Well, I want to thank you for having me on your excellent show. I really enjoyed that, and I want to thank you also for being on this show and more when we continue this series. So I really look forward to that, and I think you're wonderful. I think your show is a great addition to the Beatles podcasting community. So we thank you for bringing more Lennon or solo Lennon or whatever you want to say to the forefront, because it's definitely something that deserves to be there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, and I always thought I was going to run out of material, but it doesn't look like it.
Oh
No, certainly not.
I highly doubt that. And I'm also was very thrilled when you told me that my second appearance was one of your best shows, doing better than the other McCartney podcast guys. So that also makes me very happy as well.
I told him though. No, you're both up there actually in the Glasgow Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So that episode and your episode.
Right. So, but anyways, Andy, anything you want to add before we sign off?
It's a pleasure to meet you, Anthony, and looking forward to having you back on to continue this discussion. And as always, a wealth of information and other perspectives, and to take on and listen to it. And it's always fascinating to hear other people's take on stuff that we might have heard 1,000 times, but you could still get new spins on things from conversations. So
yeah, I feel like from what we talked about, the thing that came to me while you were wrapping up there was I think the brothers thing is very clear. The idea, in a way, they were brothers. And I think one of the things about brothers, I don't actually have a brother, I got two sisters, but I can guess that brothers don't find it comfortable saying sorry to each other. So
I can tell you firsthand.
Oh, right. You got brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So I think
do.
it's one takeaway from kind of this period of their life.
Right.
But,
Right.
yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for having me on the show. And we'll do it in the future.
Excellent. So for Two Legs, you can email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on our website, twolegspodcast.com. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Two Legs Podcast. YouTube page. Please check out our YouTube channel and subscribe to that. That's where you're going to see Antony Rotunno here make his video debut. So really excited about that. And I can tell he's really comfortable with that too.
I'm performing a lot because I'm a musician.
Yes.
But I've never had my face this close up, so I might not watch it back. I'll be honest. I'll listen to the audio version.
Right, that's fine. But Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast on our YouTube channel. So please check that out. We're going to continue our ranking the tracks series, but we're going to keep that on YouTube for a little while, and we're going to eventually, maybe at the end of February, start adding that to the audio formats. So be on the lookout for that. So as always, everybody, thank you out there for your comments, your emails. We love them. Keep them coming, whether you like it, whether you hate it. I don't care. Just keep those comments coming, and we'll have a fun time talking about Paul. And as always, everybody out there, have a great day and a beautiful night. So take care.
Bye, everyone.
listening to Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, hosted by Tom Hunyadi and Andy Nichols, with musical contributions by Dylan